Welcome to SewVeryEasy. My name is Laura, and there's two different feet that we can get for our sewing machines that look very similar. They have this little bar that goes up and around the foot. They do look the same, but there are differences. One is an edge stitch foot and the other is a blind stitch foot. So let's take a close look at them and talk about the edge stitch foot. So here's a look of those two different feet. And we can see that there's a bar that comes over top of the foot. But when we look really close, one bar goes right over top of this opening where the needle goes. So whatever stitch we're doing, we'll need to go over top of this bar or run along the side of the bar. And that foot that has that longer bar is called a blind stitch foot. On the other foot, that bar stops, so that opening is free. And that is called an edge stitch foot. You can get this foot in different sizes, but the one I will be showing you today is number 10D. It is from Bernina, but all edge stitch feet will work the same way. So this little bar is running right down the center. So we can use this guide and that needle will go right into the middle of where this center is. Because this opening is clear, we can do any stitch we want. Straight stitch, zigzag, decorative stitches. As long as it fits in that hole, we're great to go. A popular stitch to use this edge stitch foot would be stitching in the ditch. So when we look at quilting, we have fabric usually pressed to one side, and that side would be considered the hill or the road. Beside the road is the ditch, and that's where this area comes in. And this foot runs right along that ditch because of that guide. So as long as our needle is in the right position, that guide's going to follow the ditch and we can stitch in the ditch. And it's definitely a lot easier if we try to stitch in the ditch, not on the top of the road. But this foot can also be used for other applications. And the one thing is what it's named after, the edge stitch. So we're going to be able to run that along something, set the needle accordingly, and stitch right along the edge. So I could stitch really close to this edge, or move that needle over so I can stitch this edge down. So it can be very close, or it can be moved over because we have that opening. It's also great for attaching ribbon, lace, anything decorative on top of fabric or on the edge. Same idea. We're going to be able to have that edge follow, and then we set the needle accordingly so it can stitch on some of the tiniest little areas, and it will stay straight for us. So in this case, we could stitch right in between this tiny little row right at the top. It can also be done for small corded edges. So something like a pearl cotton or a little rayon or a little gimp can be put along an edge. Then that foot is going to follow that little thin edge. This is a very nice finish for tablecloths and linens. You would start with that seam finished or roll it in. So you're going to be stitching the cord into the one area, and at the same time you're going to finish that edge. It is definitely a couture finish. It can also be used to stitch fabrics together that we're only going to have them butt together. So that little edge is going to fit in between the layers, and then you'll do a zigzag to put them together. This is really helpful if you're going to put old pieces of batting together. Just use a very big stitch, have the batting go together, run it along and stitch. because this little bar does have a curve on it, you can also use this on curved hems. It can be used for narrow hems, and of course, we can always use it for a whip stitch or a zigzag stitch. So I'll be able to run that along and do a zigzag or a whip stitch. You can even join two fabrics together that have had a binding treatment on them. So we're going to be able to follow that edge and do some kind of a decorative stitch to put this together. And if we leave a little space as we're stitching back and forth, when it's finished, it's going to give us this cute little peekaboo look. I do find the edge stitch foot is a foot that I use quite often. I love the idea of that little bar there so that it follows exactly the line that I wanted it to. Regardless if it's for hem, edge stitching, or just zigzagging, I do have that already giving me the guide, so I don't need to concentrate so much on staying straight. It keeps me straight. And then the machine does all the work. An edge stitch foot can be bought for any machine, and you might already have one that came with your machine. So next time you need to follow a straight edge, give the edge stitch a try. And thank you for following me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe and come on back. Let's see what we're going to talk about next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.